soon as the service got started, I would take it off, and everyone was happy because I had worn it at least to the service itself. So that's kind of what I just did with you guys, but it's really good. I'm hot. I'm sweating up here. So it is a blessing to be able to worship with you. Again, I apologize for not being able to do service last Sunday. The one advantage for me was I already had a sermon ready for today. So you guys got 2 weeks worth of a sermon coming. I got about an hour and 45 minutes worth of preaching for you coming. I'm just kidding. Actually, yeah, you know, that's not me. And there's another service that would be in here by then. So I've been a full-time Christian pastor now for about 20 years. In fact, this month marks 10 years just at this church. In that time, I've seen some great things, and I've also seen some horrible things. One thing that I've given up on finding, though, is a normal family. It seems that every family has at least one person that keeps this family from being a normal family. You guys know who they are in your family. It's that one person that you don't like to talk about while they're around, but when they're not around, you know who we're talking about. Now, some of you guys are sitting there thinking, not in my family. I've got bad news for you. You're probably the one in your family. You just don't know it yet. The fact is, there's all kinds of dysfunction in almost every family that's out there. Normal just doesn't exist in families. But the fact is that families have been that way for a very, very long time. In fact, I want us to take a look at a dysfunctional family today that makes your family and my family look really good. It's ironic because we consider the father of this family to be one of the most important individuals in all of Scripture. But nonetheless, his family was still filled with great dysfunction. I'm talking about King David. 2 Samuel tells of the horrible dysfunction which existed among his children. It tells the story of rape, of incest, and murder. It tells the story of manipulation and rebellion without accountability. And worst of all, each of these acts occur from within the family. The internal battle that raged within David's kingdom and family was devastating. Our primary passage today, if you want to go ahead and turn there, is found in 2 Samuel chapter 14, beginning in verse 19, and we're going to be looking through chapter 15, verse 6. Although the story really begins several chapters earlier. King David had many sons to many different women. We were talking earlier, a few of us were talking about, well, how many sons did David have? Actually, David had a lot of children. Part of it was because every time he saw a woman he liked, he decided he wanted to make her his wife. So he had many sons. We don't hear as much about some of them. One we hear about often is Solomon. Solomon became a great king of Israel. Solomon was one who we would look at and admire, but the truth is not all of them would have been the ones that we would have admired. The first one we're going to look at today is a man named Amnon. He was a manipulative, lust-filled fool. And before you get too grossed out by his lustful actions, let me preface his story by reminding you that it was not uncommon in their culture for half-brothers and sisters to marry. Well, Amnon becomes infatuated with a sister. Her name is Tamar. She is one of the daughters of David. He's so infatuated with her that he can't focus on anything other than her. In fact, 2 Samuel 13:2 says, Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Have you ever had that person you were so obsessed with, you thought, I can't function, I can't do anything because all I can think about is her. All I can think about is him. That's where Amnon was with his sister Tamar. With the help of an advisor, Amnon devises a scheme. He pretends to be sick and then asks that King David, his father, and Tamar's father, have Tamar come to take care of him. Then, while they are alone, Amnon forcibly rapes his sister. Word spreads quickly regarding Amnon's actions. but there is no accountability. I could easily do a sermon simply on the way David chose to handle this situation and how he should have done it different. We're just focusing on the sinful condition of Amnon and how that relates to us. That being said, I want us to focus today on Amnon's brother. All of that other information about Amnon and Tamar is important, but really I want us to focus on Absalom. You see, Absalom was also a son of David. He was the whole brother of Tamar. See, although David chose not to respond to this horrible act of sin, Tamar's full brother, Absalom, does respond. He takes his time responding, waiting until nobody would expect anything. And then Absalom strikes by killing his brother Amnon. Although one could justify Absalom's actions, and it seems ironic that David would enforce punishment this time when he remained silent after his daughter was raped, Absalom is punished for his actions. He is exiled, and about 2 years have passed when we come to the passage where we are reading today in 2 Samuel chapter 14, beginning in verse 19. It says this: The king asked, "Isn't the hand of Joab with you in all this?" The woman answered, "As surely as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything my lord the king says. Yes, it was your servant Joab who instructed me to do this, and who put all these words into my mouth, into the mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation, my lord. My lord has wisdom like that of an angel of God. He knows everything that happens in the land." The king said to Joab, "Very well, I will do it. Go bring back the young man, Absalom." Now remember, I want you to understand what's happening here. Absalom has been exiled from the king. He's actually been staying in a neighboring nation in order to remain safe. He has killed one of the sons of King David, although he is one of the sons of King David. Absalom was a man who deserved punishment. But David, the one who would exact punishment, the truth is, he wasn't real good at it. He didn't do anything when Amnon had committed his horrible act. A little surprised that he even had Absalom exiled in this passage. After time passes, Absalom begins to develop an advocate. What I mean by that is he has a friend. The man's name is Joab. Joab is one of the most trusted men in the kingdom of Israel, one of David's favorite workers. And what I mean by that is Joab was one of the commanders of the army. He was the guy that David continually depended on. Absalom was pretty smart, and then he found a guy that he knew could be trusted. Joab has someone else go and make the request for him so that it will not just be predictable, I guess. But David sees through it and he says, "Joab's the one who put you up to this." And then David agrees. He said, "I will do it. Go bring back the young man Absalom." I share this whole portion of the passage to simply point out that Absalom, although he had made some pretty poor choices, he still had a great deal of influence. Joab was one who David trusted, and apparently Absalom had made a friend. But there were many who admired Absalom, some because of things he did, and others because of who he was. For example, he was more than just a son of the king. If there had been a People magazine back then, they would have chosen Absalom as the world's most beautiful man. 2 Samuel 14:25 says that in all Israel there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. And then it goes on to talk about his long, beautiful, flowing hair. I'm not much on saying men are beautiful, but this guy must have been beautiful. Well, having returned to the kingdom of his father David, Absalom makes a name for himself. Not just for being a pretty face, but because of what he can do. Look at it with me in 2 Samuel 15, verses 1 through 6. As we see Absalom bringing a cancer into Israel. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." And then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land. Then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Seems fair and kind what he's doing here. But the truth is, Absalom has decided he wants to set himself up as the king. He wants to be the one who wears the crown. He wants to be the one who the people love and adore, whom the people would serve. And here's the irony of it. You would have thought that Absalom would be grateful to a king who showed him grace by allowing him to come back in. Through this, Absalom would sow seeds of division within the kingdom. And it's the worst kind of division, as it originates from within. Consider the words of Psalm 55, verses 12 through 14. It says, "For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from it. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng." David knew what it was to have people attack him. David knew what it was to be at war. But it was very different when the attack came from within. And of course, it didn't take long before others would join in this division. 2 Samuel 15:12 says, "Then Absalom sent for," I'm going to try the name, Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city, from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. Here's the thing, David might not have even realized that there was a division that was beginning among his kingdom at first. You consider, Absalom is not asking for permission to go out and to greet people. He's not asking for permission to go out and be kind to individuals. David probably didn't even realize what was happening until after it was too late. It should be noted that all of this could have been avoided. Consider the fact that Absalom had an axe to grind with his father David. Had David stood up against Amnon years earlier when Amnon had raped Tamar, then perhaps Absalom would have been the greatest supporter for King David. Perhaps had David been the leader that he needed to be, perhaps all of this would have been avoided. But it didn't happen. Let me just say that finding imperfections in leadership is not hard to do. Certainly, David was an imperfect man. Often we hear about David's sin with Bathsheba, but David was imperfect in many, many other ways. Obviously, he was imperfect as a father because his family was filled with incredible dysfunction. Certainly, David, as an imperfect man, probably rubbed some people the wrong way at times. And perhaps that's what happened here with Absalom. I've yet to find a leader, though, who was perfect. I know there are certainly things that I do not do well as a pastor, but those imperfections are not an excuse for mutiny, which is what happens here with Absalom. Well, maybe you wonder what this story has to do with us today as a church. I would suggest to you that often there are those who bring an Absalom spirit into the workplace, into our families, and yes, even into the church. It shows up in various ways. Occasionally it's the blatant attempt to overthrow those who are in leadership. I actually know of pastors who were blindsided by individuals who decided that they were going to stir up trouble, and their whole goal was to get rid of the pastor. But I think more often than that, the Absalom spirit shows up in a church in more subtle ways. In fact, let me share with you some of the statements that are typical of an Absalom spirit. The pastor isn't very friendly. He didn't even talk to me on Sunday. Forget that there were 150 other people standing there. He didn't even talk to me. The pastor spends too much time focusing on people outside the church and not enough on people inside the church. The pastor spends too much time focusing on people inside the church and not enough on people outside the church. I don't like the songs we sing at church. They're too traditional. I don't like the songs we sing at church. They're too contemporary. The pastor spends too much time with those people and not enough with us. This church needs to provide small group opportunities for women who work during the week. In other words, there are not enough opportunities for me to grow. I got to confess to you, every one of those statements I have heard in our church. I will tell you, I've been here for 10 years, and all but one of those are statements that I've heard in the distant past, which is a good one. I'm glad of that. But I'm also not so foolish to believe that that sense of division wouldn't still exist. What happens so often is we have individuals who they may seem to have good intentions. They may even be doing some really good things in the church, but they can still sow those seeds of division. The one that is more recent is that last one. I heard from many of the ladies in the church that we really need to provide small group opportunities for our ladies, because we have something for the older ladies, the ones who are retired, but we don't have anything for the ladies who have to go to work on a weekly basis. What if we provided something on a Saturday? Oh yeah, we'd love that. We would really enjoy it. So what we did was, last November, we started a small group just for ladies who work during the week on Saturday mornings. And they've had a grand total of 4 ladies who showed up. I'll tell you what, it is a lot easier to complain about something not being there than to actually respond when the opportunity is there, isn't it? That's what Absalom wanted. Absalom wanted to be able to complain because he didn't get what he expected from his father David. But the truth is, Absalom was one who received just as much grace, if not more, than his brother Amnon. I'm not saying that rape is worse than murder or murder is worse than rape, but the truth is Absalom had received much grace. It was okay for his father David to show him grace, but not to show it to his brother Amnon. It's a lot easier to simply complain if someone didn't do what we wanted them to do, rather than for us to simply realize that we benefit from that same grace as well. You should also know that I don't mind individuals disagreeing with me as a pastor. However, there's a problem when you feel the need to talk to others instead of coming to the one you have a grievance with. Not just me, others in leadership. I cannot stand when individuals come to me to complain about someone else in leadership. Have you gone to them? Well, no, but I wanted to come to you first. Why? The biblical model says that if you have an offense against your brother, you are to go to your brother, address it, deal with the problem, and then if they are not responsive, then get others involved. But the biblical model calls us to go to the brother or the sister and address the division that exists. But it's easier for us to go to others rather than going to the individual who is in question. One of my favorite verses is Philippians 2:14, which says to do everything without arguing or complaining. Well, the Bible tells us that if we have something against our brother, then we must go and address it, not argue and complain. Those are the actions of one who has an Absalom spirit. Now let me show you who those people are. First, as we saw in our passage this morning, the worst culprit is the one who we would least expect. It is the one who is family. You know, we all know where we stand with a Jezebel or a Korah. Korah was the one who led a rebellion against Moses out in the desert. We know how we stand with a Jezebel, because we look at Jezebel and we say, that's a wicked woman. It's someone that is very immoral, someone who we know will lead us down a horrible path. We know Korah led a rebellion that actually ended up costing him his life, along with others who chose to follow him. We know where we stand with them. Often we do not know where we stand with an Absalom. Maybe it's because he comes from within. He's family. He's that brother. He's that individual that we look at and we think, you know what, he's one of us. It's maybe someone that we've served alongside. Maybe it's someone that we've spent time with. Maybe it's someone that we eat lunch with. We would look at them, they would greet us on Sunday morning, and we would feel like we are family because we're with these individuals. You need to know that Amnon and Absalom were family. But it didn't mean it was a good kind of family. And just because you know someone well does not mean that it is a good kind of family. Often it's someone who is simply from within. I've actually seen pastors where the divisiveness originated within the pastoral leadership. An assistant pastor who sought to improve his own standing in the eyes of the church. In David's case, it was family. It truly could be anyone, sort of. You see, 2 Timothy 3 kind of describes such a person. It actually goes a little bit further, but in 2 Timothy chapter 3, we see the description of one who would carry that Absalom spirit. This is what it says. Mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. Here they are. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And this is the one that really catches my attention. Having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. In this group of names, of descriptions of people, there are many that apply to those who have the Absalom spirit. But it is this last one that catches my attention. They have a form of godliness, but they deny its power. What does that mean? In other words, they look very spiritual. They likely attend church on a weekly basis. They probably even serve in a ministry. If you were to look at their lives from the outside, you would likely think that these people have really got it together. They are people whom we eat with and even enjoy hanging out with. They may be very knowledgeable regarding Scripture, or they may be people that have invested in our families. We love them. But the truth is that their attitude and spirit stands in direct conflict with the Spirit and the power of God. This is what it looks like. You're sitting in Sunday school with them, spending time in God's Word, and all of a sudden you have the opportunity to talk about what someone said, or what the pastor did, or what another teacher did, or about a small group opportunity that should be happening, and immediately there's reason to complain. I tell my kids often, whenever they go to bed at night, actually I ask them a question that's, first of all, how have you blessed anyone today? See, because often what happens is we just go through our day and we're not thinking about anybody else. Our goal is just to get through the day, and we don't think about actually being a blessing. Well, you actually have to choose whether you're going to bless other people or stand in the way of God's blessing for other people. Often, we're serving in a ministry together. And it creates an opportunity for us to complain about the people who were there before us, because they didn't do a good enough job cleaning or putting something back. Just do the ministry and be a blessing. It's okay. I'm not telling you it's okay for people to be slackers. They shouldn't be slackers. I get that. But enjoy the ministry that you're doing and realize that you are there to be a blessing. Not to complain about everybody else that doesn't do things the way you would like for them to do them. Bless. Serve with a heart that is joyful. We talk about giving, and we talk about giving with a joyful heart. If everyone gave with a frown on their face, you know what we would be? Some of you are saying Presbyterian. No, that's not correct. You know what we would be? We would be a church that takes on the form of godliness but denies the power of God. By the way, I'm not saying that that's Presbyterians. Anyways, the point is that we need to serve with a joyful heart rather than one that is divisive. I got to tell you, I could look at just about whatever situation I want. I could pinpoint things that are wrong, things that could be done different, and I could probably try really hard to make those things better. But if I do so in a negative way, where all I do is tear people down, and I become the one who is trying to draw attention to myself, rather than pressing on to take hold of the prize, Christ, then I actually stand in the way of God's blessing and God's power. Oh, we look really spiritual because we can pinpoint the failings and the shortcomings of other people. But the truth is eventually even that will come back to bite us. Before I give you your challenge, let me explain that last statement. Like the Absalom of our story today, the time will come where a person's true stripes are revealed. According to 2 Samuel 18, verses 9 and 14, it says, it's talking about Absalom. It says, his head got caught in the terebinth tree, so he was left hanging. Joab took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart. This is after Absalom has set himself up as a king. He has decided that he would be the king now, and he's got other people who have come to follow him. He leads a rebellion against his father David. Remember the long, flowing, beautiful hair? Apparently it caused him to get stuck in a tree. And it says that as he hung in the tree, Joab takes a spear and he thrusts it through him. You catch the irony in that? Joab was his advocate. He was the friend who appealed to David and said, bring him back. Give him the opportunity to return, to be a part of this nation. But eventually Joab realized he had brought cancer with him. You know what? It's really easy for us to pinpoint the failings of others. But there are times that we will allow our critical spirit to stand in the way of what God wants to do. And I think that happens in churches a lot. It shouldn't, but it does. I want to challenge you in a couple ways here. First of all, I want to challenge you to examine your own heart. If there are things in your life where you have begun to develop that critical spirit, because you recognize all the needs that are there, and you, with that critical spirit, have begun to sow seeds of division, I ask you to examine your own heart and begin with the act of confession. Not to me, to God. You need to come before Him and truly seek out His grace and forgiveness. He offers it freely. All we have to do is come before Him and ask. Then you need to be very intentional.